we have a special guest today who has done some really interesting conservation-related work with lemurs, in addition to studying the little beasties themselves. And we're going to start by, Kate is going to give us a sort of an overview of conservation of these animals and some really interesting things that she's learned that have given her perspective about conservation of lemurs. And in the presentation, there are going to be some photographs that are of animals that have been killed and are being sort of butchered and sold as meat. If you know that is going to be disturbing to you, what you might want to do is is turn off your video for now, or sort of turn your screen, and we'll let you know when those images have passed. But it also may be something that kind of helps you understand kind of the real world situation of what is happening. Kate, thank you so much for being here. Maybe we just sort of start by give us a little bit of information about your background and who you are and how you came to be a lemur lover, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Katharine Thompson. I go by Kate. I am a medical anthropologist at Stony Brook University. And I started out with grad school going to study lemurs in general. Lemurs are a type of primate only found in Madagascar. And I was fascinated by them. And I very quickly began to feel, the more I worked in the field and studied in Madagascar with these primates, that unless we started listening to the stories of the people that live there with them and these indigenous communities of humans, it would be very hard to do conservation. So that's what I focused my research on, and specifically my dissertation research. So one thing I like to talk about with people who are interested in conservation is kind of asking what comes to mind for you when we think of things like wildlife poaching. We all kind of have a preconceived notion of big gangs or these kind of illegal thugs coming in and harming wildlife, and it can become very quickly a sort of villain scenario because many of us care a lot about wildlife, and so the thought of someone harming them is very upsetting for us. So we tend to think of it being this big weaponized crime sort of thing when we're talking about bushmeat hunting and conservation. We see that in how charities can talk about poaching. So looking at some of these infographics, just the way that things are lined up, it's a very sort of military conversation. And so you can look at, this is one of the ways in which we talk about poaching. Again, this is another graphic from a conservation charity. And the third, and if you're looking at this kind of dialogue, if you're looking at these sort of publications, you're really coming away from it thinking that all people that kill wildlife are part of some sort of organized crime. And a lot of times they are just people who are trying to survive. And that's often the case in Madagascar. So when we talk about things like wildlife capture and consumption, it's really only one part of the story when we talk about big weaponized crime. Most people that hunt are trying to do so to survive, to put food on the table. And so in different places around the world, we call this subsistence level hunting. People that are hunting in order to support their families, not to make a larger profit. So in general, when we ignore the subsistence level hunting of primates or other animals like the ones I study, there's some consequences to this. It can cause us to villainize poor populations and overgeneralize the reasons that people hunt if we're only assuming they do it for one reason. If we want to create conservation policy that really protects wildlife, we need to make sure we're understanding the reasons that people are hunting that wildlife. And so if we're overgeneralizing that, we might not be supporting those communities or really helping prevent extinctions of the animals that we care about. And so what exactly is going on with wildlife hunting around the world right now? It's a pretty concerning problem for biodiversity. So some of our most diverse areas in the world, the Amazonian and Congo basins, which are in continental Africa, yield a lot of wildlife that's captured and consumed. Wildlife trade is one of the most valuable trades in the world, and populations are becoming extinct. About 40% of wildlife populations have undergone a massive decline in the last 50 years. And most of those happen in some of the poorest communities around the world. And wildlife hunting and consumption, not just in Madagascar with the lemurs that I study, but around the world, is getting worse. This is due to a couple different reasons. One, human population growth is continuing. Human populations are growing despite the pandemic, and the more people there are to feed, the higher the pressures on wildlife populations. Urbanization is another threat. So as cities grow and expand, they push into previously forested areas. So you get a lot of deforestation and habitats being destroyed. In general, poverty and food insecurity also drive up people hunting and consuming wildlife, like the lemurs that I work with. Communities that don't have enough food to provide for their children or are living below the poverty line are much more likely to capture and consume wild animals. Gun access and other weapons that is spreading around the world, and infrastructural development is another reason that we see hunting increase. So that means when you build a road like the one you see in this picture through a previously forested area, you can think about all of the changes that'll happen. So not only are you bringing in people to build this road who need to eat and will likely consume wildlife as they're building, as they're building this new roadway, but also once this roadway is finished, you're going to be bringing in all these new people that have never come to these forest environments before, who are all hungry and are going to need to eat something. So for all of these different reasons, we see hunting accelerating around the world. And like I mentioned, this is a real problem for wildlife populations. So wildlife populations have declined about 40 to 60% among the poorest nations in the last half century. That's a lot. And this also includes local extinctions of hunting species. So the species that you might see around your house. People are noticing within these communities that more and more of the species they see around themselves are going extinct. This is problematic because these species are important to the ecosystems, the natural habitats that they belong to. So it can interrupt food chains of how some species, some animals interact with other animals. And that's really important in areas where the forest ecosystems are fragile, right? Where removing one species can cause many other interconnected chains to collapse. So not only is this a problem for wildlife, but it's also a problem for the people who depend on these wildlife to survive. So we see a lot of this hunting in Madagascar, and a couple other important factors that I want you to know. So Madagascar is also suffering from rapid deforestation and habitat loss, meaning that the forests that remain on Madagascar are being cut down very quickly, and lemurs and other animals have fewer and fewer places to live. And there's well-documented hunting of these species. So we know that people are hunting, and we know that hunting is actually even happening in national parks as well. And current estimates, so our best guesses at how much hunting's happening, suggest that this is not a sustainable amount of hunting in this area, that this could really endanger both the wildlife populations themselves and the people that are relying on them as a source of food and income. And in general, where I work in Madagascar specifically, we don't know as much about hunting there for lemurs as we do other places. We know the situation in Africa and in Latin America much better than we do in Madagascar. We also know that Madagascar is such a diverse island that things can really change from one side of the nation to another. So we need to understand on a very close level how each of these different communities is interacting with the wildlife around them. And this doesn't just impact lemurs. Lemurs are the species the different species that I came to study. That's why I got involved in this research, was how much I loved and cared about these primates. But it's actually concern across the board for other animals, like these different tenrecs that look like little hedgehog guys. We have bush pigs. And then we also have these weasel-like cat creatures called fossa. So when people are hunting and consuming wildlife, it's not just the lemurs, but all sorts of species. And so again, as I mentioned, it's not just about wildlife that we're concerned about, but also people as well. So I tend to blur out any faces of little kids out of respect for privacy. But what this graph is telling you is that people are hunting because of malnutrition. So Madagascar, compared to other nations, is one of the highest in terms of both food insecurity and child malnutrition. So this graph over here is a graph showing rates of anemia, or a condition related to malnutrition. As you can see, these are all different regions of Madagascar. And for both women and children, rates of anemia or iron deficiency is really, really high compared with what we see in the United States, which is much lower. And this graph tells us that women and children in Madagascar are suffering levels of malnutrition really off the charts compared to what we see here in the States. Madagascar has also had to deal with a lot of agriculture and humanitarian crises. So within recent history, before I started my dissertation in 2018, we're talking about locust swarms, we're talking about widespread famine, we're talking about less rice than people have, normally that they rely upon. So all of these different pressures, we then know drive people to hunt and consume wildlife more. And so my research and what I do is kind of considering all these different factors. So we know that things like political and infrastructural issues, so whether your government can actually protect wildlife and enforce those rules to keep them safe or not. We know that human population growth, that lack of conservation enforcement, poverty, having enough food, dealing with famines, we all know that these things impact wildlife hunting and consumption. We don't exactly know how they mix together. And so my research and what I do kind of looks at all of these different variables, all of these different things that can affect how people need to hunt and consume wildlife, and categorize them so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on. And again, we care about wildlife hunting and consumption because, as we all know with COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic, that when people are eating wild animals, sometimes there can be diseases that hop into our population because of that. We're worried about the animals we care about going extinct. And then we're also worried about the humans that rely on those resources. So when I say decreased ecosystem services, that's a fancy way of saying that these indigenous people need certain goods from the forest to survive. And if they don't have access to those, that also puts them at risk as well. So that's why my research kind of settles on these three core topics as a way to understand and protect wildlife. So I look at the socioeconomic factors that cause people to hunt. I also look at the public health and food security factors, so people being hungry, and I look at the conservation concerns, so things like laws and other legal structures that are meant to protect wildlife. So that brings you to a tricky question with what I study particularly, is how do you research something that's not supposed to exist? Wildlife poaching is illegal, and a lot of times people don't want to talk about it because of that. But if we want to understand how to protect these species, how to keep them safe, and how to take care of the people that are depending on them, then we need to talk about something that most people don't want to talk about. So I like to spend a lot of time thinking about how to encourage conversations about something that's traditionally hard to talk about, like wildlife hunting. And so for my research, what I've come to do in order to gain another insight into looking at wildlife hunting is to kind of look at the trash that people leave behind as an extra clue. So when we throw away stuff, right? So if I throw away a candy bar in a candy bar wrapper and it ends up in my trash, if someone was going to see that, they could tell that I was eating Skittles or Reese's or something else like that. What we throw away tells a story about the actions that we do, or in some ways, or in another sense, the things that we consume. So when people are capturing and consuming wildlife, the bones that get thrown away also help tell a story. And so that gives me another way to look into a behavior that many people are trying to hide. I can ask them directly, do you hunt or consume this species or that species? But I can also look at the bones that are left behind in the garbage as a second way of looking at things. So this is where I work. I work on the western side of Madagascar. It's very dry. So if you kind of picture like an Arizona sort of climate and temperature, that's what the ecosystem look like where I work. This is Dr. Becca Lewis, who helps run the field site near where I am. And this national park is called Kirindy Mitea National Park. So there are lots of lemurs and other species that we all really care about that take refuge in this area. But this part of Madagascar is also one of the poorest areas in the entire country. Like I mentioned before, it's super vulnerable to famines and other environmental issues. So we know the people around here are often going into the forest to try and find things to eat. So I am going to show you a little bit of pictures of what it looks like where I work. So this is our field site. In order to get there, it is a very long boat ride up and down the coast. We take a lot of canoes and other things to get to where we're going. It's a very dry area, so it takes about a 2-hour hike from the ocean coast into the forested area. This is a picture of me when I was doing some of the research there. So all in all, it's about 12 hours from the capital down through a boat ride and then a hike, and then you get to the village where I work. So I work specifically with about a community of 300, 400 people. All of them generally are used to eating lemurs and other species to survive. It's how they make their livelihoods and how they make sure that their families are fed. But just like us, they also have concerns about whether or not these lemur populations are going to be around. They care just as much as we do. And so my research and what I seek to do is to document their stories and tell their reasons for why they need to hunt and consume this wildlife. So far, what we've seen is a lot of people are doing this not because they want to, not because it's their favorite thing to do or their favorite food, but because they don't feel like they have another choice. And so what I'm doing with this research is to try and help figure out what things people would rather be doing, whether that is that they'd rather, have a larger farm, or they are interested in having more chickens or other solutions, and to see how we can balance that so we can make sure that their families are fed while also making sure that the wildlife populations are protected. So as I mentioned before, I look at both the survey data, meaning I talk to people, I write down what they're telling me, and I listen to the stories that they tell me, but I also look at the bones that people leave behind when they hunt and consume wildlife. So this is a picture of shells and bones that I've dug up from these village trash pits. So I joke with the people that I work with that I am the stinkiest researcher around. I have to go through a lot of the trash piles that they have in their villages, and I look for their leftovers. So with their permission, I excavate these holes and I take out and wash all the shells and the bones and other things that I find, and I start counting. So I take out all the different bones and I sort them into bags and I kind of guess which species they are. As a wildlife illustrator too, I spend a lot of time looking at bones, and so it helps me match up which animals are there. So this is a lemur skull that I found and labeled, and eventually I count all of this. So I'll share with you guys a couple different graphs, but I don't want to go too deep into the sort of boring side of science. But what this is telling me, as sort of a rainbow colored table here, is the different type of animals that show up that this village is eating. So in the orange, you can see those are domestic species. Those are things like cows and goats and pigs. The green are forest species like different lemurs. And the blue are marine species. So things like seashells and crabs and clams. And so when I look at this picture, the colors tell me that people are eating mostly marine species, a little bit of forest animals, and only a smaller amount of domestic animals. So it gives me a picture of their diet through the bones that they left behind. It's kind of like if someone went through your trash and in there they saw a candy bar wrapper, I don't know, a KFC box, and an ice cream container, and they could piece together what you're eating. So that's what this lets me do. And so just skipping ahead in some of the photos, this is important because taken together, what I can do is understand how people are eating things, like so what they're hunting and consuming. I talk to them and I get their stories and I understand why they're doing it. So far, like I said, my research has told me that this isn't people's favorite thing to do. It's not because they don't value these animals. They love them too. They have many culturally important stories about these animals. And it's not because they don't know the rules. They know the rules. They know what's legal and what's not legal. So my research shows me why people are eating what they are. And it also shows me how much. And so kind of in a little bit of a summary, what I'm excited about now with this data, the important part of this is we can come back and we can have conversations with these communities, and we can start making plans together, talking about what they would rather be doing besides just hunting, how they would like to change their livelihoods. And when we talk about solutions that take care of people and animals at the same time, this is how we can find something that balances humans' need for things like food and a regular livelihood and protecting the lemur populations that we care about. So I'm excited about this kind of research because I think this is the way that we're going to be able to take care of both wildlife populations and the humans that depend on them. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be super excited to address them too.
Let's see, I'm going to, if people would have a question for Kate at this time, I'm going to encourage you to drop that into the chat. You can also, as this, if you have a question that you also know, you can also just use the raise hand function, and we can bring your questions to Kate. After she's done with this presentation, I'm going to be showing you some tricks and ideas about drawing lemurs. And during that time, you also might have more time to formulate a question. And so I want to encourage people to ask Kate about these sort of things. I think that your work, Kate, is fascinating on a lot of levels.
Thank you.
I think one thing that is particularly relevant is that this is, I think, a great example of the way that science can be used as a tool to dig deeper into a situation, well, quite literally, in your case. Right?
Yeah.
To look for what are actually sort of deeper causes of what's going on, and be able to give us the information to create policy that is based on evidence, and rather than on our sort of knee-jerk sort of reactions like, I don't like seeing a dead lemur, therefore this. But this is also, when I think about issues around social justice, environmental justice, and these sorts of things, you're considering all those things and the real human beings who are on the ground as you're doing this. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. So a couple of questions. One is, what is first of all, the time span of these middens? Sort of how far back in time are you going?
So that's a very good question. And I also should have clarified that midden, trash heap, same thing, right? Just in terms of a little bit of scientific translation there. So the time span of the trash heaps, the middens that we find, we don't really know. That's actually kind of an unknown. We can tell by the condition of the bones, so how they look and feel, that they're at least several years old, because the bones are kind of flaky, they crumble a little bit, but we don't know. We know that the village itself is at least 50 to 60 years old. So it could be that those were some of the first things people ate. The lemur bones, we can tell, are more recent because they're so fragile that they wouldn't survive that long. So that's one of the things that we kind of have to accept is like a little bit of an unknown. But that's a very good question.
Another question that was posed is about, does the work that you're doing in a way sort of address issues of population growth?
So that's a good question too. I don't address that directly, but it is something that the larger conservation world is talking about, right? So like how many kids you have and how that influences how many people you can feed. In my research, we see a correlation between like the more children you have to feed in your household, the less food everyone has to go around. So it's kind of a larger conversation about helping parents plan how many kids they want to have and what that means for the amount of food they have and how to balance that. So that's a tricky issue with no one clear solution, but it's definitely part of the larger conversation with conservation too.
And also kind of to put in over a layer over that also, that in many places having a larger family is a form of social security for people who are in places that are really food insecure. So, and especially if there's high child mortality, in order to ensure that you're going to have some offsprings that are kind of making it down the line, sometimes it's a useful strategy to have more because of the instability and food insecurity that you have.
Oh, for sure. Like there are all these different factors that go into people's decision making, and that's absolutely.
As you're talking to people on the ground there, what solutions do the people in the village say? That are there any things that they're saying that they would like to see in terms of addressing their food needs and their community needs?
It's a lot of different lines of thinking. So specifically where I am is like, again, if you're looking at a clock, it's like 9 o'clock on Madagascar. It's like one little corner. So just to caveat that like what people say in this one place may be very different from what people say other way. So where I am, it's really, really dry. And when you talk to people, their main, for many of them, their main sense of competence was in agriculture, right? So they're largely corn farmers, not so much rice, which is a very wet plant, but corn, cassava, other sorts of drought resistant fruits and vegetables. And over the last 5 years, they've seen those really decrease. So a lot of these people say, if agriculture was better, I would feel a lot better. If we invested more in our agriculture, if the government helped us, if rain wasn't so bad, I'd feel a lot better about that. So in our area, we're seeing that there is a push towards maybe agricultural investment. But the reason I brought it up to say that's so different is where some of my colleagues work up around, you could say 1 o'clock on the exact opposite side of the island. It's very rainy, it's very lush. And what they've found is rather than eating lemurs, people would rather be eating bugs. Believe it or not, there is a type of bug that they call a bacon bug. It looks like a big grasshopper. And it's very easy to farm. It's very profitable. So they're in that area of the country piloting a program where they're helping people start little bug farms. And it's really successful so far. So bacon bug, yep.
Yeah, there are people who are watching this call who are sketchnoting it. And you have just, I can only just imagine some of the illustrations that are appearing on some people's pages when you mentioned bacon bugs. That's next level. That's next level. I mean, that's sketchnote gold right there. The bacon bug.
The bacon bugs.
So probably by the end of this talk, you're probably going to get to see several examples of sketches of bacon bugs in people's sketch notes.
Someone asked about the scientific name. I will absolutely find that during this meeting and drop it into the chat for you guys.
That's really, really fun. Yeah, there you go. On that note, what I'm going to ask people to do is, if you have a question for Kate and it hasn't been answered yet, I'm going to ask you to write that down right now or drop it in the chat so that it is not lost. Because very often you have a good question and then other things happen and then you lose that question. We're going to be coming back and peppering Kate with more questions and thoughts and ideas at the end of the talk. What I wanted to do is just do a quick little workshop on sketching us some lemurs. Actually, in relating to that, one of the questions was was about what is the place of ecotourism in perhaps providing more economic security in some of these areas.
Yeah, so ecotourism is a tricky subject. In a lot of places, having ecotourism, which is to define that is kind of like when you have tourists come to visit a national park. And so there's an incentive for local people to help take care of the animals and protect them so that tourists will come. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has also showed us that sometimes those tourists don't come. Like how travel has been interrupted, that can then, if tourists don't come, cause effects for the people that were depending on that income. So there's absolutely a a strong success story to the idea of things like national parks and bringing tourists in, and that can help the local economy. That does happen. But what we're learning with the COVID-19 pandemic is it maybe shouldn't be the only thing we rely on. And that we need to think of different ways beyond just ecotourism to making sure local communities are supported and animals protected, even when those tourists don't still arrive.
Makes a lot of sense. So should you find yourself there and you want to sketch you up some lemurs, all right, we're now going to drop into a little section here on sketching some lemurs, and then we'll return to any questions for me about sketching lemurs, or also, folks, Kate is a scientific illustrator, right? And we also, if you have any of your field sketches of lemurs, we would love to see that as well, just because we geek out on seeing other people's sketches and journals. Would love to see what your journals look like. But let's take a look at sort of drawing some lemurs, some lemur drawing tricks and thoughts and ideas. And then we will return for question and answer at the end and have a chance to go deep with Kate here. Kate, thank you so much. This was such a kind of a window into thinking about how we think about things and reframing a problem where if you're at the start, you're like, if it's framed as a military issue, the answer is really clear. Get more guns than they have, right? But that is missing so much of these underlying causes. And the way you're reframing this, I think, is really, really powerful and appropriate. I really respect that. So, and also just sort of, here's one other footnote. Kate is also a principal director at an orphanage in Tanzania. And we are, she and I are in discussion about, at the end of the next Nature Journal expedition to Tanzania, a group of us spending some time at the orphanage to teach nature journaling to the kids at her site, and in addition to that, join them on an expedition into one of their local national parks to go nature journaling with them. So Kate, you got game and you're working on all these really wonderful levels. Mad respect. All right, let's talk lemur sketching. I am going to, here we go. This is a skeleton of a lemur. So these are perhaps some of the bones that Kate is looking at in her midden sites. Let's just think about this skeleton structure for a minute. That, remember, often when we're talking about making kind of fast sketches of things, for the skull, we're just sort of putting in a little initial placeholder ball, and then we look at the shape of the kind of the line along the back, and we've got a little rib cage up here. The front legs on the primate here hangs down. You notice you've got a shorter front limb. So this is your upper arm bone, your humerus, and then you've got your radius and ulna that come out to a little hand that's 5 fingers. 4 of them together and 1 separated. Big sort of thumb off to the side. Now the hip bone sort of runs along the back here, and the leg bones are much longer than the arm bones. So the femur here, really, really long. The tibia, fibula, really, really long. And then you've got your little foot here. So the foot is just like your foot with a sort of toes here. It's got a heel, that's its ankle right there. So in this sketch, in the photograph, if you look at where my cursor is sort of wiggling around, that is the point where you have your ankle. That's the ankle. So your toes are coming out here. So this is essentially your foot with a thumb coming off to the side. Now, as I was looking for kind of reconstructed skeletons, I was finding all these sort of sketches of lemur, of skeletons that were kind of like this, and they had.
Jack, could you move your page over just a bit, please?
Here we go. Thank you. Like this, and then they had that the knee all kind of crouched up in here, like that. Now, of course, the lemur can do this, but typically when they're walking around, they don't have their leg all zigzag-zed up like this. And that means that the booty is higher. So the typical posture is going to be with your rump sticking up, which kind of gives you this high back. And then your leg is coming down from there. So if you look around sort of lots of reconstructed skeletons, you'll see them with this sort of flatter posture. But in the wild, what you're going to be getting is much more of them kind of coming around with that little rump up. So here's a little lemur, and notice that that rump up. We've got a wonderful long tail. Essentially, you can imagine yourself in this little primate suit: hip, knee, heel on the ground, shoulder, elbow, wrist on the ground. So it's the same anatomical structure that we have. So if you're drawing something like this, a really kind of fast way to do it is just start with a ball for the head and then look at that angle of the back. So we're coming up and over the back, and then your tail is going to be kind of flowing down from there. Give yourself a little bit of sort of chest room here. So there's a rib cage in here. And the body you can think of as sort of occupying this sort of bean shape in here. Your hip bone is in here. Your shoulder blade is in here. So that means that the front leg is attaching close to the front here. And what you want to do is make a smaller box here, and your hand is then there on the ground. On the hip, you have a big box. I'm going to put that forward. And then smaller leg bone down. So always you have the upper leg muscles are much more beefy than lower leg muscles. You see the same thing actually going on the arm, but much more pronounced and in your face in the front. And then you have your little lemur foot flat on the ground there. We'll be looking at the face in a little bit more detail, but initially think of the kind of guidelines for the face. If it's looking at you, a straight line down through the face, a straight line across through the eyes, just as you would with a human being. And then different species will have different patterns on their faces. We'll give you an example of that in a minute. But this one, if you kind of look at it, there's this really neat X pattern over the face. So you have down in here a little muzzle. You have in here around these eyes And here's for right now, for the ear, I'm putting an angle up and just thinking of that dropping down and cutting in. So an angle up, dropping down, and then cutting back in. We'll deal with the tail in just a moment. Let's take a look at this one. So different angle. What I want everybody to do is just make a kind of quick gesture sketch of this. Let's make a quick sketch of this lemur. So there's kind of coming down to a head. So get that going on your piece of paper. Here you can see very clearly that the upper arm is thicker. The forearm is thinner. And then you're going out to a little hand with 4 together and 1 separate. And this lemur is going to wander away in about 30 seconds. One more, let's just do the same with this. Now, if you're thinking, I can't see exactly where this little lemur's leg is going and how it's folding, just pay attention to the major shapes. it will be going away in about 30 seconds. So when these critters are moving around, they're so adapted for cruising around in the trees that they take these very strange sort of sideways loping gaits, and sort of pop up very much like you would imagine a human being running around and then doing a sideways dance. But remember, it's the same basic anatomy: hip, knee, heel. And you can see this when they are kind of up and running around. And there's your little person in a lemur suit, kind of cruising across the trail there. But very often taking this sideways, doing this sort of sideways step dance, doing this kind of shuffle dance. So that would be something to look for. So let's just try this for a second. What I want people to do is just to make a quick little icon sketch of this sort of, crouching tiger, hidden lemur pose right here. Just to kind of get some of these stances, into your head. And if you do martial arts, here's your horse stance. Maybe you should now rename it lemur stance. If you're doing kind of quick postures and gestures and things, sometimes you don't have time to do a really detailed sketch. But if you kind of can get in your head, sort of remembering that, okay, you've got a really kind of broad stance and you kind of hold your arm out in front of you and you look the direction you're going, you can often recreate not a detailed sketch, but something that is going to sort of show you that basic posture. In a fast sketch. Maybe they're doing almost like a Tai Chi pose here. Now let's just talk briefly about tails, because they're cool. And if you want your lemur to look lemury, you got to have a tail. So what I want people to, if you're kind of doing a quick sketch here, I was just kind of getting little bars across, kind of going like, look, there's some tail, some black and white, black and white, black and white, black and white going down the tail. All right. But if you are making a sketch and you have a really good look at the tail, and you want the tail to feel like it has volume. What you don't want is it to feel like, here's a board and it has been painted with black and white bars. And it's really easy to get this effect when you're looking at making a sketch of something like this. But instead of visualizing it as this flat thing with bars going across it, what you want to do is visualize it as a cylinder. Visualize the tail as a cylinder. And that means that this bar going across it is going to wrap around. like that. So if you look at this here, there's a little bit of a curve here, a little bit of a curve here, a little bit of a curve here, here. And if you look here, curve, 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 because this cylinder is slightly tilted towards us. This one we're seeing pretty much straight on. And so if you were to sketch this exactly like the way you're seeing it, through here, it could look pretty flat. But this little kind of curve that you're seeing here, that is going to, what you want to do is imagine that you are seeing a cylinder with lines going around it. But now we're also going to make this fuzzy. So if this is my cylinder, and it's got fuzz, ooh, well, that's fun. I am going to I can put in a few little hairs sticking out here. And then see, this line is coming closer to you and then higher up here. And in the sides here, I'm going to put in just a few little hints. Then all of a sudden I have a fuzzy tail kind of wrapping out at a 3/4 view. So as you are sketching in these lemur tails, looking for, here, this one is kind of going straight across, but any place I have a little bit of a hint of that, I am going to want to show that. Now, check this out. This is cupped up exactly like I've got in the sketch over here. It's straight in the middle here, but look at these ones here. These ones are the arch is going, so here is an arch that is higher on this kind of going up higher on the sides, lower in the middle. You see the same thing here, lower in the middle, higher on the sides. Here straight across, look at this. On the sides here, even, this is going down, but if you straighten this tail out, it would be higher in the middle. So what's going on with that? Ooh, well, I'm glad you asked. What is going on here is that if I look at this pipe the other way, then these are going to wrap around the opposite direction. And what this tail is doing is, if you want this tail that is coming up here, this part here, you can think of this as a cylinder here that is kind of coming up towards you. Then across here, it is a cylinder that is more inside view. And then over this way, here is a cylinder that is pointing away from us. So that means that in this part here, these lines are coming like this. These ones in the middle here are coming more across. And these ones here are coming up. So if you're tail changes its direction, you're going to find a corresponding change in the direction of those curves around the tail. And that's going to allow you to construct then a tail that is going to feel more, let's just join these up. More like the tail is coming towards you, alongside you, and away from you. There's a bunch of different species of lemurs. They've got different cool patterns, but something that you're going to be seeing consistently on all of them are these really big, wonderful forward-facing eyes. So just like in a human being, when you are looking at them from the front, you are going to have these really cool eyes. When you're drawing these eyes, take a look at how many eyes you would put between the two eyes. So on this one over here on the top left, you can essentially get one eye, maybe even a little bit less than one eye. This one here, there's clearly one eye distance between its two eyes. But I get down, I get down here, right? And I've got maybe 1.5 to 2 eyes between my eyes. So to make your eyes look right, you want to, when you're drawing it from the front, you're going to be saying, like, if I've got 2 eyes between my eyes, I want to think there's an eye there, there's an eye there, there's an eye there, there's an eye there. Kind of looks like a spider now, doesn't it? But those eyes can be really useful spacers to help you get that. And similarly, if you're drawing it from the side, the eye from the side is going to be that little triangle. So because, so things that often do a lot of work in the trees, including the primates, they will often have forward-facing eyes. So not just predators, but these forward-facing eyes help you kind of triangulate on where you see that branch that you need to grab as you're jumping from tree to tree. So it's a useful kind of measuring tool. Eyes from the side in your side view, circle eyes in the front, and get the spacing between those, and that will really help your critter have the expression that you're looking for. I'm drawing that head with eyes where there's one eye between them. That's going to be a really different look. Last thing about eyes is to pay a little bit of attention to the wrinkles and lumps of tissue and skin around the eyes. So if you just have a couple of circles placed onto the face of your critter, it will feel like there's a couple of circles placed onto the face of your critter. But just a little bit of eyelid helps kind of set these in place. Very often there's in the front corners, there's also kind of a gland right in there that will make a dark mark. That will help sort of set those eyes into place. And then it feels less like there are these two circles just floating in the void of that face. Those are a couple of tricks on drawing some lemurs, and I hope that this will encourage you to get some lemur on. So either from photographs or a local zoo, or if you just happen to have a lemur kind of hanging out in your house, you can sketch from that. So I also want to send a special shout out and thank you to Carolyn for letting me borrow Safaka, her favorite lemur stuffy. Let's see here. What we'd love to do is to let's kind of join our group here for questions. Let's start for questions for Kate about the work that she's doing, the conservation that she's doing, and if you've got a question you'd like to ask, you can either just physically raise your hand or use the raise hand button. I will see you, and I'm now looking at the gallery to see if anybody has their hand raised, or you can use the raise hand button. You also, any thoughts, comments, or ideas about conservation, sort of human relationships to, and what some of this is beautiful is you're trying to look, I think, very realistically at the complex real landscape in which this hunting is happening. Maybe a kind of a quick question I would like to ask you is kind of like, how did you sort of get towards this framework? Because everything else I've seen, like, poaching, okay, is, yeah, that there's that idea of the poacher in your head, and that is it takes a very different mindset to even ask this kind of question. And I was just sort of wondering about what part of your process was to kind of shake out that old paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I started at the same point where most of us do as wildlife conservationists, like very heavily invested in wildlife, like art education and the programs, especially that we direct toward children, which are in themselves like very, very valuable. But the more time I spent in these communities and doing some of these conservation education programs, and they're almost always with kids, I started wondering, like, what happens when the kids go home and they still need to eat, and like, what does life at home look like? And I've been fortunate to get to spend about on and off 10 years in the field at this point in Kenya, Tanzania, and Madagascar. And every time I went over to study animals, the funny thing happened is I ended up spending more and more time with people in these communities, and you start going home with them and seeing what it looks like where they live, the stressors they face. And so I was kind of faced with putting together, like, how do I reconcile the efforts that we're doing in terms of conservation education and awareness with the lived reality that these people are still stuck with, and listening to their discussions of, them asking me, like, so many people here come to see the wildlife, but they don't seem to really care how we're doing, or sometimes in Madagascar, like, someone told me, like, I feel like my government cares more about lemurs than people, but like, I'm here too. And so trying to myself come to a balance between, like, well, I really care that these wildlife populations survive, and there's also humans. And I don't know, I'm a parent, I have a toddler, you've met her. So it's kind of like, it's great that we're doing things that engage kids and educate them and get them passionate about their wildlife. But also, if you gave my toddler a coloring book, she can't eat it either, like, she still needs to eat. And so as a parent, kind of putting myself in their situation of how do we celebrate the intrinsic value of wildlife while also how do we make sure we're not discounting their experiences, especially as you brought up, it's a social justice issue. A lot of these communities are isolated indigenous communities. So how do we balance and advocate for their needs while also advocating for wildlife that doesn't have its own voice? I don't have a perfect answer, but I care about trying to find it.
But I think you're engaged in a process that, you know, that can, if we are going to get an answer, it's got to be through a process like this. I mean, I really respect that. It's so, and to, but it's difficult for us to reframe a lot of these sort of entrenched ideas in our own heads. It takes work, and it takes being, you know, deliberate, conscientiously doing that. Also, you mentioned that the people gave you permission to go through their trash piles. You're being invited into people's homes. So it makes me think that you are welcome and you're trusted. Mm-hmm. And what did you do to establish relationships to the degree that people are actually, like, if somebody was going through my trash can, I would say invasion of privacy. Oh, no, you don't. Right? Yeah. You must have to really do something, and especially if I'm trying to hide from you the fact that I know that there's evidence of what I'm eating in there, and I don't want you to know that I had a McDonald's hamburger, because that would destroy my public image, right? So what are you doing to first develop trust and then to be deserving of that trust?
I mean, I think honestly, like, it's a mixture of blunt honesty and humor. And I mean that in the sense that, like, I come to them and I'm like, I am not here to report you. And often people would ask me, like, is this good or is this bad? Like, that was their favorite question of, like, I'm eating a lemur. Is it good or is it bad? Like, what are you going to say? And I'd be like, it's not my right to tell you, right? Like, I am not here to pass judgment. You eat what you need to eat. You know, like, I am not here to say anything. And that sort of honesty alone seemed to get them a lot of respect, because they're used to being a part of, like, a larger national park region, right? They're right next to the park. So they assume if they see a foreign white scientist that we're only there for the animals, like, almost like we have blinders on to the people there. Yeah. And so by just spending time with them and saying, like, you eat what you have to eat. I am not here to pass judgment. I am just here to learn from you. You're teaching me what your life is like. They really appreciated that level of honesty. And then honestly, just like a lot of jokes of like I mentioned earlier, I joked that I'm like the stinkiest researcher ever, but I joke with them and I'd be like, I'm so sorry that you got the scientist that's playing with trash. You know, like, you got the weirdest scientist. I'm so sorry. You know, and they respond to that, you know, or like, you know, they ask me like, oh, do I hunt? You know, do I want to try hunting a lemur with them? Which obviously for me is like a ethics boundary. And I would just joke like, you don't want me to, I would waste all of the arrows or whatever you're using. I'd be so bad. You don't want me to try and hunt that. Like, you know, so a blend of withholding judgment and telling them like, I'm just here to document what you're doing, you know, and unfortunately I won't be able to like send someone in to fix what you're dealing with either. You know, I can't send someone in to fix the food security situation. All I can do is amplify your guys' voices and be a messenger. That level of honesty mixed with like some good humored, you know, fun at times tends to be pretty successful. Because I'm honest about my limitations, but also honest in the fact that like, I respect what they're doing in terms of them trying to survive.
What languages do you speak?
Comfortably, I speak Spanish, and then in research land, I speak Swahili from Kenya and Tanzania, and Malagasy. The tough thing with Madagascar, which is worth noting for people that are interested, is it is so ethnically diverse. There are 18 different ethnic groups across the island. that even Malagasy from one side of the island to the other can't understand each other a lot of the time when they're speaking the dialects of Malagasy, not French, the colonial language.
Yeah.
And so I learned on the eastern side of the country, I can speak comfortably, I can have conversations there. And when I moved to the western side to do research, because no one was working there, and so we didn't know much about the hunting, even the translators who are Malagasy that came with me were like, I don't know what people are saying. And I was like, no, you're the translator, it's your job. So again, like meeting the challenges with humor a lot of the time.
Just your mindset, kind of going into these challenges. This gives me hope for my species, Kate. That's really cool.
For a long time, I think we've looked at conservation as like a people or wildlife issue, you know, and that comes from a place of us caring so much as people that love wildlife. We're so passionate. But I think hopefully more and more we'll see it be a people and wildlife issue together in a broader conversation that's more inclusive, especially for Indigenous people.
Yeah, that's huge. If you do want to ask a question directly to Kate, just please raise your hand. Also, some people have dropped some questions into the chat. What is the current population status of lemurs, or of the species? How many are critically endangered, threatened? What is that status? And then we're going to be joining Stephanie, who's going to be asking the question directly.
So I don't know in terms of numbers, right, of like the several different species that comprise our family of lemurs more broadly, the different population numbers. I can tell you that there's, I think, 116 species of lemurs total, where they're still finding new ones. Oh yeah, it's crazy.
Whoa.
But yeah, there's a lot. A lot of them are very small distinctions from each other, you know, but about 94% of lemur species, so you think close to 100 out of that 116 are threatened or endangered in some way. So it's pretty bad. And then you think of it globally, lemurs are about 1/5 of the world's primate population. So for almost all lemurs to be endangered is actually a huge percent of the world's primate population to be threatened as well. Yeah.
Wow. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, we are going to allow you to unmute here. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Katharine. That was a wonderful talk. I just had a quick question about your graph showing the middens. I don't know if you mentioned it, but how far apart were they? Because I just found it really interesting how, you know, there were some where it was almost strictly forest animals, and then, you know, then there were some that had the split between marine food and domesticated food.
Yeah, I have a map, but I feel like it's not going to be very helpful to show. They're all pretty close by. So when we talk about a village, in terms of the study village where I worked, it's about 110 houses. And I'm trying to think of a good comparison. I live in Brooklyn. So maybe if you had like 4 to 5 city blocks is the whole thing.
Okay.
So all of these, if we're walking around this village, you could walk around the circumference of the village in maybe 15 to 20 minutes. So all pretty close by, which is interesting because even though it's a small area, it differs greatly in terms of what people are eating. Yeah.
So is it like, do you think it's based on the location, or like could there be a temporal pattern? And is there any way that you could assess, I don't know, isotopes or something to let you know a little bit more about the timing of when the that midden was mostly created? Because just that amount of, because it would seem weird otherwise, right? Like if they're using all of them at the same time, like, ooh, let's put all the lemur ones over here and put all the, you know, the domestic animals over here. Just, it seems weird to me that that pattern was so strong, and it didn't look like just noise, right? To me, it really looked like, okay, these two are almost strictly forest animals and these are more mixed.
I think it's a mix of a couple different factors. Like you named just a couple right there, right? Well, there's spatial distribution in the sense that, picture this as like trash cans that you share maybe with your household members or 2 other households. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's just spatial distribution of like a hunter lives at this house, so they're having more lemurs than a household that didn't have a hunter. There's definitely temporal signatures, so time passing. An important thing to note with the zooarchaeology or the animal bone studies is that animals that are heavier, that have heavier bones, those bones are probably going to survive better over time. So we would expect to see more things like cows and very few things like bats or birds, because the very fragile bones tend to get ground up over time, especially with like flooding or cows walking across, which we get a lot there. So there's some, like you said, there's noise. There's absolutely noise. And one of the best ways, like, were this study going to continue longer, would just be to keep matching up the ethnographic data, so our conversations with people, with the archaeological data, because then it's almost like we're seeing behind the scenes. Because then I could ask you, like, how many lemurs did you eat last week? And you tell me I ate 4. But if I don't find them, that doesn't mean necessarily you're lying. It might just mean that your neighbor's dog came through and got them all. And I think the answer to your point is, like, there's also always going to be some noise that we can't account for. And that's why I'm, at least with my science, I'm always clear to say, it's okay that we don't know 110%. This is my best interpretation and analysis of what I'm seeing, but it could also be off. But for sure.
And also, just note, folks, here we're seeing epistemological honesty. being totally okay with knowing what you don't know. And and you're kind of dealing with your known unknowns and your unknown unknowns there. I mean, that's, so props to that.
I think we should do that in science more than we do, I think.
I think we need that sort of in, not just in science, but in all of our kind of human thinking and problem solving. Stephanie, did that address your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I have more questions, but I don't want to monopolize the time here. I'll let other people ask questions. Thank you. That was very interesting and enjoyable. And I agree with Jack. It gives us some hope about how we can make maybe both sides of it work for conservation and obviously for the communities that have to live in these challenging conditions.
Well, I want to then actually to invite you to ask another one of your questions, because nobody else is raising their hand. And so you get to ask another one.
I guess my next question was just going to be sort of, what do you hope, like you finish your dissertation and you publish the data, how do you hope that either other people will build on it in the future, or how do you think it could influence policy in a way that would benefit both angles?
I think it's a couple different things. Like, one, it's just getting us from the purely scientific side, getting a clear picture of who's hunting and why, right? So that's like not even policy yet. That's just like understanding the situation. And that's when I'm not like a hardcore primatologist or ecologist. I am not that smart, is what I like to joke. But we can pass that data over to the people that can tell us this is sustainable or it's not, right? That are really good with population dynamics and those sort of things. So that on the scientific side. And on the policy side, hopefully we can start designing policy in better collaboration with local people. So kind of having a data-driven approach to say, like, look, if you want to make a difference in hunting pressure, our research suggests that child malnutrition is one of the highest predictors of who's hunting, and that's true, not just a random fact. So maybe instead of giving everybody chickens, or something random, like direct that toward child-focused nutrition solutions, right? So kind of helping, whether it be governments or NGOs that are involved in conservation, helping them have a better idea of where to direct their funding and where to direct their interventions in ways that are both effective, like we know that they'll make a difference, and culturally acceptable, so that they match up with what people feel is best for them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
That's really cool. Stephanie, thank you so much for being with us. Those were really juicy questions. Katharine, do you by any chance have any of your sketches or drawings from your experiences that you could just hold up to your screen?
Yeah, I can screen share in 1 second if I...
Okay.
Unsurprisingly, it's often a lot of bones. to let me.
I'm not surprised, and I'm really, really curious. This is going to be cool.
So 1 second, the video and then screen sharing. There we go. So this is just from my website. And so if you can see here, the stippled, I just make sure you guys can all see it okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So before I went abroad, I realized that if I was going to be doing this work with like archaeological remains, that there weren't a lot of good guides. Like if you need to find what a cow bone looks like, there are a million guides on that, but there weren't a lot of comprehensive guides of things like lemurs or fusa, that sort of Pink Panther looking animal I showed you guys earlier.
Yes.
So I went over to mostly the American Museum of Natural History, got a pass to go through all of their stuff, and drew a lot of these guides for myself to bring into the field.
Wait. Let me just repeat that. So you are going to a place and you know that there aren't guides to bone guides to the things. So you went into the science museum, got the bones, and you drew your own field guide to these bones before you left.
Yes.
Okay, you just got even cooler.
Thank you. I'm honored.
That is crazy cool. All right. All right, you've got our interest. All right. And so and you're using stipple here just to sort of to show the changes in planes of these bones. And boy, that stippling really makes those kind of contours of those surfaces pop out.
Yeah, I wanted something that would be simple enough that I could communicate just what I wanted to communicate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And often when we're using like morphological, so when we're using the shapes of bones, which we call the morphology, when we're using the very small differences in shape to help us show what species is one thing and what species is another, really, this is my dog from Madagascar hanging out, really reducing the picture to what shows the difference, you know, so like, okay, this, you know, pelvis is deeper than this other one, or this has a bump that sticks out here and this other one doesn't. Using stippling or using the art that has this little dots to show that was a way that I could focus on what I needed to focus without having things like color or I don't know what else, but just be distracting.
So here we have the hip bone on the right from the top and the bottom. Is that from the same species?
Yeah, so this is a shafaka. So like your stuffed animal dude that you had before. So this is the top of his head looking down. And this is a attached pelvis. So the hip bones are fused together here. They're not separated.
Yeah.
So this is looking at the front this way. This is the front. And then this would be looking from the back in towards the front. Yeah. So front view, and then this is like from the back forwards.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so art helps me not just communicate the science that I do, but also helps me do it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that was KateThompson.com.
KatharineThompson.com. Yep.
KatharineThompson.com. Maybe somebody could drop that into the chat, and those are hand drawn. Stippled.
Thank you.
And it said colored pencil on that.
Yeah, I've done some other, I'm happy to show you. I've done like a couple of other things too, but nowhere near as impressive as your work, but I have my slowly building repertoire. So again, not as comprehensive of a website, but these are some of the things that I've drawn for fun rather than for science, per se.
Oh, this is great.
Thanks.
Oh, that's fun. So I want to encourage people to check out this site. And if people wanted to follow you in the work that you're doing, how should they keep in touch?
My website has all of like my social media and email. I'm always happy to answer questions, and let me drop my email into the chat too if anyone wants to keep talking. Just proofreading it real quick. Yep, so that is my email. I'm always happy to continue these conversations and talk more. And then you have my website for kind of a larger picture of things. Yeah, it's been really nice to draw and talk to you guys.
Let's take a look into the journals of some of the people who are here. Is there somebody who wanted to share either some of your journal or your lemur or sifaka drawings with Kate, or have other journaling adventures that you wanted to share? You are live with Kate.
Hi, this was amazing. Well, I just got in love with primates just a little while ago with some other book, but those are old world primates, and I didn't much care about the new world kinds. But
oh yeah. Look at that tail, and that just you can see on that tail that form kind of coming up. Ah, yeah.
Those are so good.
thank you.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, Ray Bonto's been putting in a ton of pencil miles.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And is there any from your field studies of things going on around your neighborhood? Have you made any other interesting observations?
Well, to tell the truth, I only did one page, and it was, guess what? The last.
So you need to get yourself a new sketchbook here, and you're looking at your local the pigeon population again.
Yes. Today I counted 120 plus, more or less 120 pigeons.
Wow. And what's going on with the breeding behavior? Are you seeing more or less of that?
Well, to tell the truth, I haven't been counting that much lately.
We'll cut you some slack. It's okay.
Yeah, I know, but
fun. I love some of those pigeon contours there.
And daffodil and stuff.
Oh, what fun! Yeah, spring is here. Now it's time for you to go get a new sketchbook, right?
Yep, tone paper.
Tone paper this time. You're gonna go Walter style. And you've also done a tone paper sketchbook before.
Two.
That's right. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
So where are you reporting in from today?
Well, still in the Canary Islands, but on a different island. So not on Tenerife, but on Fuerteventura now. So, but I had a question. I wasn't here from the beginning, and a few years back, we were in a kind of like a special zoo in the south of Spain. There's a small kind of patch called Gibraltar, which belongs to the United Kingdom. So, and there was a special zoo where these animals that have been kind of caught in the wildlife and by the customs, they were kind of taken into this zoo. So they don't go to illegal markets. But I was wondering how much of like the lemur population is affected exactly by poachers, or maybe that's not the thing that affects them the most. Maybe it's I don't know, the loss of forests, or the loss of food, or how much like the poaching affects them.
That's a really good question. So it's hard to have like an exact separation, if that makes sense, because if there's like hunting pressure and deforestation going on in the same place, and it's equally affecting the same lemurs, it's not like a 1-to-1 count, but those would be like our two biggest ranking things. So hunting in general legally, and in Madagascar, it's much more of for the consumption then like for like the large scale trafficking, there absolutely is a pet trade or like a larger global trade, but it's very small compared to how much are getting eaten locally, if that makes sense. And then in terms of deforestation, Madagascar has lost most of its forest cover. Current models suggest that all of the forests in Madagascar could be gone as soon as 2050, which is really soon. Yeah. So yeah, I see some eyebrows going up. Yeah. And that's just a model. So we don't know, it could change. It's just what we think as scientists might happen. But so as far as we can tell, like the two biggest threats are some mix of hunting on one side and consumption and deforestation on the other. So yeah.
That question also reveals that you've really thought a lot about these sorts of issues. Really astute question.
Yeah,
Walters?
we were in that zoo, and there was a special kind of cage for the lemurs, and it was a fun visit because they were sitting on kind of the railings, and we were having a chat with them. So I kind of remember it, and that's why I asked. Yes.
Were they the ring-tailed ones?
Yeah, they were the ring-tailed ones. Those I see most often, like but I've never been to a place where there are actually lemurs in the wild. So
yeah. Are there any pages from your journals that things that you've been doing recently that you could show?
Yeah, I have some here from Fuerteventura, but I think I'm gonna, when we're going back, so I have kind of a bit more to talk about. But I had this before we came to here. This was of a I don't know what are those called in English, but maybe this makes some sense. These are kind of like juvenile frogs. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know what yeah. So I think they are because well, on Tenerife it's mostly pretty dry, and there was this kind of little like a pond in the old river, and it was full of these kind of little things just flipping about. So I was wondering
what is the size of this? What's interesting about this is this has fins sticking out on either side.
It had fins, and it had this weird black bob kind of on its its back.
So this excludes actually the tadpole, or the juvenile frog hypothesis here, because we wouldn't see those structures.
I don't know what they're called, tritons or salamanders. Salamanders. I think. Yeah, maybe, but maybe I mistook the fins because they're very small. They were like just like that tiny.
Oh, so those things were just. So this is greatly magnified.
Yeah, this is greatly magnified.
Another possibility are these kind of do look like fish, sculpin perhaps.
But where did it was a really small pond. It's only like this deep and about 2 times 2 meters. So, and it is only full of water when it rains, and I expect if it hasn't rained in Tenerife the last week, it probably has dried out. So those cannot be fish.
Strange. How strange. Kate, any thoughts and ideas on that?
I mean, I don't know as much in terms of like the species specificity, like you're saying with the habitat drying out there, but in terms of thoughts of your drawing, I was really impressed.
Wasn't that rad? Yeah.
No, I was trying to read some of the small notes you have in there. It's hard to see.
Oh, no, notes are in my language, so it's not readable. Yeah.
Super cool.
Lots of asking questions, making observations, integrating so something that I think is really slick that's going on here. I love that, so that you've got that sort of the drawing, the colored shaded thing, but then you're also sort of showing the degree of motion with it. That there's the upper part of the body is less movable. The end of it is much more flexible by having that little line drawing kind of flipped out to the side, and then also just taking that bad boy and doing the side view of it. This is cool. This is solid note taking going on here.
Yeah, thank you. I can share one page here from Puerto Ventura because I really like it, and I frankly cannot wait to share it. But and the rest, this was from yesterday. It's not much because the gull was sitting, but I was very happy to do a detailed study with my spotting scope. So you on a, what was it called? A yellow-legged gull. I think it was a yellow-legged gull. And they had these cool beaks, kind of, the tip was kind of pinkish orange, then there was the kind of the red patch, and the rest was yellow, and the red around the eye. So very cool looking bird.
Oh, this is next level stuff. This is really, really exciting. And also, it's great to see the little study on the side that isn't colored in, all those quick little color notes on the plover there. Oh, wow. That is such a solid little plover. Wow. Wow. This is really, really inspiring. Ease mentioned that really loves that face drawing on the right-hand page. You're just right up in that little plover's business, and that, 3/4 views, front views. Wow, this is exciting.
Yeah,
and,
it was fun.
You're also using toned paper, right?
Yeah, so this was the most fun because I got to put white on top of the toned paper. So
Wow.
it's always fun. I was trying to figure out how to put the shadows in, but luckily the gouache, when it dries, it gets more transparent. So before I put down the white, I put some blue over here and the ear patch and under here where there were some shadows, and it got transparent after it dried, and it has some shadows therefore. So
Oh, love it. Isn't that inspiring, Kate? That's really, really fun. Walters, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
thank you.
I'm going to bring in another Kate, and then Ivea will be joining us. Let's see. Add spotlight. And Kate, thank you so much for being here with us, and you can now unmute.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I don't have a ton to show, but I really took to heart the bird nest stuff that we were working on Tuesday and tried to do a few more of those.
Oh, yeah. I love those deep darks in that nest there.
Yeah, that one turned out quite well, I think. I tried to do a full painting, except I used a type of nest that didn't have the same sort of materials. It was a blue tit. And the chicks kind of fade into it. So not totally happy with that one, but it was fun to do.
Well, again, I hold that one back up because you've observed the different, notice on the sides, the front, the back that are facing you, you've got these sort of long darks and long lights. Take a look over on the right-hand side as it's wrapping around the side there. You've got these little short darks and lights. So the amount of run of one of these fibers, you're going to see that as being longer or shorter, depending on whether it's being foreshortened by going away from you or running along your field of view. I think this is a really successful handling of those nest fibers.
Let's see. I don't have much else. I've got the lemurs. Been working on people a bit more. I've been looking at pictures from reenactments and trying to get using the same techniques from drawing birds, where you try and find the shapes. I think it worked really well in this one, where you kind of block in that negative space and find those curves. And then I just have some lemurs. I also drew Kate. She's on screen.
Yes. There's a picture of Kate.
Yeah. Well, that's all I've really got. Hopefully I can get some more work in, show you guys next week.
Oh, that's really fun. That's great. Kate, thank you so much for sharing that. Katharine, did any comments or thoughts on the that you wanted to share? Please do.
I mean, I'm just really impressed. All of the work that everyone's sharing is so good. And then like, obviously we don't get a full peek through your sketchbook, but the range of subjects and styles, like almost like the reenactment ones you have are almost more like graphic novel style, and how they capture the action with those bright colors. So I'm just super impressed.
What I was trying to do with that was I was just using a brush pen, because I really wanted to do a very loose sketch and then just commit to those lines instead of fussing over them, since I've kind of figured out that the key to really advancing is to just do stuff again, like just for silhouette stuff. Like here's some ducks I did a couple weeks ago, and then most of the same species reappear. Where are they? Yeah, all through here, and then you can see sort of the shapes start to improve and the eye for it tends to get better. So a lot of it's just repetition, but yeah, and also finding a style that I think works well with like realism, plus kind of creating stuff that feels like it's sort of cohesively done without having to put in hours and hours and hours to make it look finished. So yeah.
That's really inspiring. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, Kate, I know that you are going to have to bounce in just a moment. But before you go, is there anything else that you wanted to share or comment or final thoughts for the group?
I mean, it's just been a pleasure to join you guys. So I know sometimes the topic of poaching and like wildlife hunting and consumption can be hard to talk about, you know, especially for people that are super passionate about conservation. So I'm also just grateful for everyone's openness and willingness to see things from different perspectives. And also their willingness to share their drawings, because I will definitely be back, but just to draw next time. So thank you all.
Well, I'm really inspired by the way that you think and the way that you are engaging with stewardship and conservation, and as well as and not leaving our species out of the picture, but thinking about that in a really rich and comprehensive way. This, like I said, this is it's people who think like this that give me hope for my species. Right. Thank you so much for being here. I see that Susan's got a question. Again, Kate's going to have to bounce, and when you have to, just feel free to jump off the call. A few other people will be sharing, but don't feel bad that you need to roll when you need to. Susan, really good to see you. And you can now unmute.
Well, so yeah, this was so cool. Thank you. I love getting to like understand. I mean, Jack has already said everything, but you know, getting to see how the human aspect of this, matters is I know as a kid, I definitely like absorbed the message of like humans are awful. We're just going out and killing all these animals and humans are the problem. And, which is like such an unnuanced view. And it kind of ties into that militaristic thing. So, I really appreciate, this part of that. Anyway, just to share. So really quick, I'm like, okay, I got the library, interlibrary loan. Boom, right here.
Oh, you got
see
some Keith Brokey going on?
Yeah, this is the only one they could find for me.
One Man's Island.
No,
Kate, are you familiar with this illustrator?
So cool. Look at. I said, open up to a random page. Look at these lichens.
Oh, lichens are so hard to do.
So anyway, thank you for drawing my attention to this. I'm going to see if I can badger them into finding me more of his books. But and yeah, so it's very, very cool. So I'm having fun. And also, while we're at it, I also got some Albany Public Library socks because they had socks with the library logo on them. So
that's good. That's good. You can't have too many library socks.
But anyhow,
my daughters would also be impressed by your socks.
Well, they're great.
There's a sock diversity in our house.
I've been slowly losing sock diversity as I've had socks wear out, but yeah. But anyway, so what I was actually wanted to share was just not a whole lot, but I discovered we moved into a new apartment about 6 months ago. And I haven't actually really gone out into the rather small backyard yet, but I finally did go and look and realized there are fox grapes growing all over the side of the garage. And so I'm very excited because I see them growing occasionally out in the woods, and I never really take the time to look at them closely, or I'll eat one off the vine when I find one. They're very tart, so I can only eat about one. But this is an opportunity for me to actually watch them grow and document that and everything. So they're really just, I was trying to get the way that they all kind of intertwine and flow, but there's this horizontal flow for them. They're all the stem is down there.
Yeah.
And they all grow this way, and there's all different sizes of them. When I realized, I was just out looking at it again today for a moment, and I realized what I didn't catch in here, because the actual wall of the garage is so textured that I can't, it's hard to see things on it. But I realized that there's these little attachments where the vines attach to the wall that are really cool looking. So I'm going to add that to this and maybe do some more pages and draw that more carefully. But anyway, that was a lot of fun. And all the grapes are still on there. I don't know why the squirrels didn't get them, but the grapes are still there and they're all shriveled. Yeah.
I love that splatter across it too. Eve was wondering if you were, if you started with, also folks, look at the dimension on those. By leaving that white on the top edge of those twigs really gives them, you can feel like there's sunlight, hard winter sunlight hitting those. Eve was wondering if you first did the bricks and then painted over them, or did you paint those bricks around the existing grapes?
Sort of a combination. So I drew in all the grapevines and everything. And then I went really lightly with a pencil and I just drew the lines where the bricks were. And then I painted, the big vines that I wanted to have a little bit of white on them, I painted around those and also left a sort of space where my pencil lines were. But then for the smaller ones, I just painted right over that. And then I figured that, a lot of this here, I just painted right over, because I figured I was probably going to paint something darker over the top of that anyway. And the grapes, I think I just painted right over them because there was no way I was going to try and do the little fiddling thing in there. And actually the grapes, I did a blue, and then I went back over with some colored pencil because I couldn't really get the texture of the shriveled up grapes.
That's what a detail inset is.
Until I went in with a
just have a little
pencil.
thing that you can
So
off the side. So saying,
I thought to leave a space for that, but I'll probably on the next page I'll probably do some. It was also a question of I went out to try and draw this, and I think I said 28 degrees, which better than
mad props for you. You're
well, I went out I started trying to draw it, and after about 10 minutes I was like, okay, I need my fingers. So I quick took some pictures, went back inside, and then finished drawing it and did the painting thing. So I intend to go back and like do some more, and I'll watch it throughout the year, because I know that the flowers are really interesting. At least I saw one in flower once, and they don't seem to have any petals. They just have like stamens, at least from what I could tell. So now I have the chance to actually like look at that more closely and see. So that'd be a lot of fun. So I'm hoping to like go crazy with this and like have lots of.
Oh, that's fun. I love that page, and that splatter effect in the background also just adds some great texture back there.
Trying to, the bricks are very textured, so I was trying to like get a sense of that. But yeah, that was fun. I've been having fun. Got spatter all over my computer, but
oh, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Avea, did you want to? Yeah.
I've been doing my restoration work, and I've been working on the side of the hill by these toyons here, because bird nesting season's coming up in like a week. And there's this tarp all over the underside of this hill. And it's leaving me with more questions than answers. I'm guessing that they put it there to try to control the Delaria odorata, but it doesn't seem to be working very well. The Delaria odorata is everywhere. That's the Cape ivy. And so then I'm wondering, is it inhibiting a possible seed bank of rare plants that could be underneath it? Is it helping the erosion? Is it hurting it? Are we eventually going to be taking it out? So I have questions now.
So you've got questions not just about sort of nature things. You're looking at the not taking the protocols that have been passed down as a gospel.
Exactly.
Trying to figure out but what really are the best practices, and how strong is the evidence for these different practices? That's really cool.
Exactly. And then last but not least, I don't know quite what I think I left you a message about this bird, that there were a pair of birds that were being adorable together, and that I noticed that they had this kind of look with their beak, and this is hard to really illustrate, where it almost looked like when you have the old cartoon and somebody turns on a stove and then the stove explodes in their face and leaves that mess of soot all over their face. It looked as though the birds had exploding soot all over their faces. And I'm not really sure. I tried to look on iNaturalist to see if I could find any birds that looked like this at all. And it could be a bush tit in the middle of changing its foliage. I mean, not foliage, feathers, featherage, whatever that's called.
Yeah. If I know for a lot of warblers that will stick their faces into eucalyptus flowers, they can get this sort of black, sort of tarry look on their face that can sometimes even block their little birdie nostrils. But would bush tits be in those? And are those kind of blossoms even open right now? I don't think the eucalyptus are in flower right now. I don't know. That's cool. I don't know.
I'm not sure either. So wait, you're saying that because I heard about that. I heard about birds that were getting their nostrils blocked by the eucalyptus pollen. So that's the warblers?
A bunch of little, a bunch of birds that were kind of coming to those and doing nectar feeding at those flowers. And the warblers were a big part of that.
That's really good to know. I've been wondering which birds they were that were dealing with that, because we've been learning about how some critters, like case in point here, our monarch that I saw fluttering down the lane, that monarchs seem to really like them. They like to do their roosting on them, but then there's the other animals that don't do so well with them. So that's going to make me want to pay more attention to the warblers, like the ones that I saw a couple months ago. Saw some, are these called Townsends? I think these are Townsends here. Sorry, I'll show one more.
Such lovely birds. Love me some Townsend's warblers.
These are Townsends. I'm sorry. Where are they? Oh, yes. Townsend?
Yep. This is looking Townsend's, that big dark cheek spot.
And then there was some other really, really light yellow one, but I don't know who that was. And they went away too quickly. And I still don't know who the mustache snowdrop bird is, but.
Light yellow, kind of yellowish green.
Yes.
Might be the orange crowned warbler. You usually don't see the orange crown.
Oh.
Check out orange crowned warbler as a possibility in that.
And you realized that it was even a slight tint of green. I didn't even write that down, but that's what I remember about it too. Orange crowned warbler, you said?
Orange crowned warbler. And yeah, very often you don't see any orange on it, and they're very kind of this dull. Yeah, that's
Thank you.
a real
And
possibility.
thank you. And to answer E's question about temps in San Francisco, I'm not sure. We've been getting some really colds and some really not colds. It's been very, I don't know. But I do know that we're in a drought still. And I was told last week that they're very worried about most of the manzanitas and a lot of the other plants that they've planted around the Presidio, and that's been really messing up the planting season. So they're probably going to start dropping off maybe like a bucket or something like that of water so that I can take care of them while I'm on site. But that's how
we're taking care of all these little plant friends. This is huge. The stewardship you do is just absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. I just feel sad that like it didn't used to be the way that we needed water. We used to be able to count on the rain to do it.
It used to fall out of the sky. That was nice. But it is changing. It's so strange to sort of see this change.
It is.
So in just a moment, we're going to be wrapping up this workshop. Avea, thank you so much for your help. Want to just send out a shout again to Katharine Thompson for her work and research on lemurs and humans and the way those intersect. Thank you for sharing your questions with her. Thank you. We really made her feel welcome. So thank you all for being so welcoming to her. It was such an eye-opener to see the sorts of things she was considering in that research. Wasn't that cool, Avea?
Extremely. And I love that she is so cognizant of the human element, and that she's paying attention to how the people who are actually there feel about it. Yeah. I think that's been in past, I think that's been somewhat of a problem with the researchers, is that they'll try to separate that out from like what they're doing in the research fields from what the humans are doing, but it's not like you can. Yeah. Not when everybody is in the same place, sharing the same environment. So
we are we're the species that has the biggest impact on everything that's going on this planet. We are, you think a beaver is an environmental engineer. That's nothing compared to what we do. And even in places where we don't do that directly by changing elements in the atmosphere, or I was just on a remote pocket beach the other day and picking up trash that had all floated in off the ocean. We have capacity to do damage. We also have a capacity with our brains to make good decisions, and good decisions that are based on evidence. That's what we need, I think, to kind of help us move forward.
Absolutely. And to teach other people about it too, so that we can practice it together. We were talking the other day in the educators forum about how science is a team sport. Yeah. It's not something that one person does by themselves. It's all of us working together as a collective. So thank you for picking up the trash on that beach.
Oh, that's one thing you taught me. It's actually because of you, Avea, that now a trash bag is a part of my nature journal kit.
Thank you for doing that. And then
that's you.
A little bit more than a month, and we get to celebrate Jack Day too.
That's right, Jack Day, April 3rd, coming up. Gonna have a birthday. They seem to keep happening every year. So I'll find a fun way to celebrate.
Yeah.
I'd love to go get sketchy with all of you. All right, my dear friends, you all take care. Take care of each other. Let's take care of this planet. Let's go out and find wonder and beauty around us, celebrate it on the pages of our journals, learn more about nature around us, and let's take thoughtful steps to proactively protect, steward, and conserve the biodiversity and the wondrous life on this planet, which includes us human beings. I am heartbroken at what is happening in Ukraine right now. There are families and people and natural ecosystems that are in such trouble right now, not living in that place. It's easy to take for granted that we don't have that kind of, that we're not living in a war zone. Let's really kind of keep our thoughts and our hopes open for what we can do to help each other. I think that more than ever, this world needs kindness and people paying deep attention to the world and deep attention to each other.
Absolutely.
Maybe so. So until next time, bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jack, and your lemur friend.